He grew up in a construction family in the era of technology. Today, he's leveraging that lifetime of experience on big commercial real estate projects to help build a better system for owners and project management consultants. He also has a unique seat to view the macro forces across multiple CRE asset classes. Welcome to this week's edition of Storage Unlocked, brought to you by PB Brown General Contractors. I'm Thaddeus Campbell, Director of Business Development and Strategic Branding at S3 Partners. He is Zach Sette, the co-founder, I shouldn't leave his brother out of this deal, the co-founder and CEO of Outbidd. Zach, first and foremost, thanks so much for taking some time to come on the show. We got introduced by Alexander Mitchell Reams, formerly of Radius Plus, who's now working with Outbidd. I got a chance to sit down with you a couple of weeks ago. We had an incredible conversation about some of the things happening in CRE today. Very much been looking forward to have you come and join me on the show. I'm going to start out with the question I like to ask a lot of times. Outbidd, you're now the CEO of an AI-driven platform for owners, project management companies like S3, perfect for what it is that we do. What got you to this place and in the commercial real estate world?
Yeah, so I grew up in kind of commercial construction, commercial real estate. My dad owned a construction company for about 35 years or so, and so it kind of just was like a natural progression. I went to school for finance, didn't have a ton of interest in doing investment banking or anything like that, like some of my friends did, but always had a natural draw to commercial real estate development as well as commercial construction. So after school, I started working for a GC and developer, and just kind of went from there, worked for them for about 3-4 years, and just kind of saw the process from all these different angles, both my dad on the subcontractor side, working for the GC, working for a developer, as well as kind of doing some like owner's rep and third-party project management work, and just kind of saw it from all angles, and just kind of, that's what got me like really interested, and obviously been a part of it kind of my whole life. So that's high level.
I, I, it's interesting. I had a family on, a husband and wife team, actually. You're with your brother building Outbidd. Yesterday, it was a husband and wife team that are developers. And one of the things they said, they came out of the fix and flip world. They're now building a Class A, north of 8 figures boat and RV facility. The sheer number of people that are involved in a single commercial real estate project is staggering. Like, it's something that people don't necessarily understand. And you're kind of helping and filling that niche with Outbidd of making sure that everyone can communicate cleanly in a central place and know what the heck is going on.
Yeah, 100%. So, the way that we saw it constantly when I was on the GC side and the subcontractor side was we were watching how all these different ownership groups were managing their projects. And at the end of the day, it is their projects. They're putting up the money to actually build out whatever these locations are, whether it's a new development project, a multi-store rollout, things like that. And so they're the ones putting up the money. And the amount of projects that we were working on, where I saw how they were kind of managing it and kind of the lack of transparency at the top, for them to fully understand, hey, what is actually going on their projects, how to actually manage it properly, and then making sure that there is that central line of communication from the top down, so that everything that's going on in the actual field, as well as in pre-construction and things like that, is all feeding back to those ownership groups that are running those jobs. So we kind of just take a kind of a natural approach that way.
I'm going to circle back to Outbidd because it's fascinating to me. I want to pull back a little bit because one of the things I was really excited to talk to you about is more of a macro conversation of what's going on across commercial real estate. Obviously, this podcast is based in the storage world, a little bit of small bay flex woven in there. And one of the things I've been fascinated about over the last 3 years, obviously interest rates got hiked in March of the Fed made their first rate hike in March of 2023. They've hiked continuously for a short period of time, and everyone kind of was waiting for things to come back down. They haven't. They're doing the exact opposite right now. Storage has continued to see things trading at 5 caps. In unbelievable. I think Public Storage just finished the NSA merger. 4.8 cap was eventually what they assessed that purchase at, which is an insane number in a market where interest rates on traditional debt are, 6.5. Even if you're getting Lifeco money, you're high fives right now. From your perspective, and you're talking to a bunch of owners across different commercial real estate asset classes, what are you seeing in terms of the general health across commercial real estate? How pressing is it with what's going on with interest rates and construction costs?
Yeah, I mean, so you touched on a bunch of different things there, specifically around like storage. Obviously, my background is not a ton inside of storage. I've worked on some storage projects themselves, but I do have kind of more of an overarching background in like multifamily and some like industrial and things like that. But kind of like on a macro level, what's kind of happening with interest rates, kind of nailed it on the head with they've kind of went up for a while, starting in like 2022, 2023 with those first rate hikes. And then from there, for the last like five Fed meetings, I think now it's been stabilized. So I think that's like the last like 8 months. I think the last decrease actually was in December, and it's kind of just stayed the static from there. However, with like the way this kind of like the macro environment is right now, I think it's somewhere around like 900 plus like billion in loans are kind of coming due right now, where the balloon payments are due. People need to refinance this year, and with that being said, like the second half of 2026 is where a lot of those are coming due. So be really interesting to see what's going to kind of happen, where most of those people locked in rates back in 2021, 2022, when they were at historic lows, where they were locking them in maybe for 4.5%. And I think right now what they're seeing is about 1.5% is what's going to happen, like 150 basis points up on those. So it's now they're trying to lock in loans at 6%, 6.25%, stuff like that. Like you said, maybe with Lifeco money, they're down in that high fives. But at the end of the day, you're still looking at a large basis point hike that a lot of these like developers and a lot of building owners honestly can't like afford to take that large of a hit on their buildings. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure. I've seen some interesting things with banks around how they're starting to take a little bit lower of a spread too on kind of like what they're looking for from their actual like partners in the industry. So we'll see what kind of happens, especially like as a lot of these come due in the coming months. But hard to put like a firm judgment on it. But we definitely see a lot more people as well that are acquiring rather than building, just because of construction costs have increased so much over the last like 3-4 years. I think it's up like 25% or so. And so what ends up happening is they're looking at buildings to either acquire or build. And you're like, okay, well, it doesn't pencil to build this building over here because I can actually go acquire a similar asset down the street over there for, kind of a better return on my money. So it's kind of like all over the place, but it'd be interesting to see kind of how the next like few months shape up. I know next week we'll have the next inflation report, so then we'll find out like what the Fed wants to do in September for the next Fed meeting there. But I don't foresee any interest rate hikes or decreases, but it's hard to judge.
I think that was one of the things that jumped out at me about your website when we went through it, and we'll give viewers a chance to take a sneak peek at it later on, and the ability to schedule an appointment with you if they want to look at it. But one of the things that becomes wildly important to somebody who owns a building is if you refinance with too high a leverage, and then all of a sudden 5 years later you've got a refi due, that balloon payment is due. Is your DSCR going to make it to what you need to cash out to get out of your previous loan? And you tend to
Yeah.
think, well, it's 5 years, I'm going to pay enough principal down and be okay. But what we've seen with the incredible, I mean, listen, when you go from 3% interest to 6% interest, it's not just doubling the cost of your interest. It's significantly higher than that for anyone who's ever looked at a spreadsheet. And so in storage specifically, and I know multifamily has faced a little bit of this too, but not only have we seen the interest rates climb, but we've also seen rates compress a little bit over the last few years. So it's going to be fascinating building off of what you said, in the next 6 months to a year as a bunch of these projects come due. Because to your point, banks are in a sticky situation, right? They can't afford to have a bunch of this debt turn bad because people can't meet a DSCR to refi out. All of a sudden you've got billions of dollars of bad debt on your books. That doesn't help the bank in any way. So are they going to get kind of creative in the way that they deal? It made me think of something when you said that. I mentioned the public storage deal earlier. They raised a bunch of money at 4.8 in a environment where the 5 year was at 4.3, right? So a 50 bip spread over the 5 year, which is, listen, if your alternative is to go put money into a 5 year treasury at 4.3%, you're taking the risk of putting, and that was a $10.5 billion project. It wasn't a small amount of money. Somebody out there was like, all right, we'll take 4.8 instead of 4.5. That's tightening your willingness to margin, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, going to be fascinating to watch over time. I'm interested to know from your perspective, What are you seeing across the asset class? Because you're obviously talking to owners across different, real estate asset classes. Where are you seeing people, scared, okay, kind of towing the bottom line, doing really? Are there niches within commercial real estate that are doing really well?
Yeah, I mean, so storage, since we're talking about it, I know a lot of your like listeners are obviously in the storage realm. They probably understand that, with storage, there hasn't been a too large of an increase. If anything, there's been a decrease in terms of the actual like revenues that people are like rents that people can charge. There's other avenues though, or other like asset classes that are doing pretty well. So multifamily we could talk on briefly, but the area that's really doing well is in, data centers. You're seeing a large influx of, I know that you also do like small bay flex as well as like smaller warehouse space. Like that's seeing an increase in interest right now because there's actually not enough of it in the marketplace, as is whereas like storage, there might be an over supply in the marketplace. And depending on certain areas, there might be oversupplies in other asset classes. Especially say like the larger scale warehouses where some of the bigger players in the industry, like your Amazons and stuff like that, maybe didn't don't need as much like space inside the marketplace. Office, of course, is down. However, we are seeing like kind of a little bit of a resurgence in people wanting to return to the office. And so with that, we'll see if like some of these like office buildings end up like doing better. But you're seeing a lot of like office to multifamily conversions as well. I mean, anecdotally, I can't speak to like specific facts. I haven't heard of too many of those penciling super well when it all comes time to actually build them out, as well as like actually doing the work and going through with it. Just because there is so many functions of an office building that doesn't necessarily work great with multifamily, especially with how many penetrations you need to put through the floors and things like that, even just to run, for all these different bathrooms and kitchens, as well as a lot of
Yeah.
people don't want to look out specific types of windows. They want to look out nice windows when they're looking outside their house. So it's it'll be interesting to see like what kind of happens there. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like multifamily, it kind of is like market to market on like what's happening there. Like I can speak really well on Philly market just because that's where I'm from. So like I know specifically saying like the Northern Liberties area and like Fishtown, if anyone's familiar with Philadelphia, they kind of built so many multifamily like properties so fast that there's kind of like an oversupply of market. But with that kind of like stemmed back to the interest rate issues because when they probably ran those numbers 5 years ago, they were running them at 3, 4% interest rates probably on permanent loans. And now when they actually came like finished, they were getting 6% interest rates. And so they had to increase all of those rents. And so a lot of those units, I think it's still like 1/3 or so, like 20+% is still sitting vacant inside of like Fishtown and Northern Liberties because they're trying to get like $4,000+ a month for 1,000 square foot 2 bedroom, 2 bath, which I know if you're in, New York or maybe in LA or something like that, that sounds like a good deal. But down in Philly in the like it's not even not suburbs, but kind of like outskirts of the city, it's pretty expensive for most people. So it's really interesting to see. And I know that they're offering a lot of like different kind of like perks to get people in. So it's still some of them are 2 years out and they're still offering concessions for 2, 3 months rent free just for people to sign and move into the
Get someone
buildings.
in the
So
door. Yeah.
yeah.
Storage does that with a $40 intro rate, and then your rate 6 months later is $230, and they hope you're not willing to move the stuff out. It's sort of the deal.
Exactly.
Uh, to your point though, and this kind of ties back to our conversation earlier. Look, if you underwrote at 3%, interest rate long term, which why wouldn't you have in 21, 22, 23? Nobody, I don't know anyone. There were a couple people. We all thought they were doomsayers that thought interest rates would go to 7, 8%, which they did before they came back down into the sixes. You didn't underwrite to a 25% vacancy rate, right? Like you underwrote,
No.
hey, we're going to be 90, 95% occupied. When you combine those two things together and you got a balloon payment coming up, man, it's going to be very interesting to see the dynamic of what happens. This is one of
Yeah.
the things that's blown my mind. And again, I know you're seeing multiple asset classes. We've seen a lot of money still coming into storage. I just mentioned the public storage raising 10.5 billion in PE money to go do the NSA acquisition, but that is far from the only big money that's come into the space. My question for you is that money a function of the market potentially recovering? Are we looking at seeing things get better over the next couple of years? Or is it just that capital's got to go somewhere? I mean, you can't put your money in the bank and let it sit there and not make any type of a return. It's got to go someplace.
Yeah, well, I'm hopeful that it's a combination. I obviously hope that the market can, can bounce back and continue to grow. But from, kind of a little bit like going and touching on like, well, money's got to go somewhere. I mean, at the end of the day, you had a lot of people sitting back on the sidelines when interest rates initially spiked up. And so when interest rates went from 3 to 6% over 12 months, people are like, okay, well, I'll just hold off because you have people saying, well, they're going to come back down. They're going to come back down. And so I think now it's been a couple years, it's been like 3 years or so, and people are starting to realize, oh, they're not just going to come back down. And now I'm sitting on all this money and I got to do something with it. And if interest rates aren't going to come back down, then I might as well move my money to try and make something with it. And so I definitely think that that can kind of cause a little bit of a resurgence. But of course, I'm always hopeful. That the market bounces back. If interest rates come down a little bit, that obviously promotes and sparks a lot of energy inside of the industry in general. But yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a combination of the two. But hopefully we could see a big resurgence coming back. But we'll find out.
From your lips to God's ears. Let's hope it doesn't get worse before it gets better. I get a little scared, and again, I default to storage, but storage has seen in the last decade, nearly half of the existing square footage has been built in the last 10 years, which is an insane amount of construction in a 10-year time period, even for a relatively new industry, right? Storage didn't really start an institutional type build until late 70s, early 80s. Even then, not that big, right? I think Public Storage in the 2000s owned 1,000 stores, not even. So anyway, the reason I bring that up is because you mentioned office earlier. You weren't alive for the savings and loan crisis in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I was, I guess, 16, 17, 18 years old when a bunch of savings and loans around the country went out of business because they funded a bunch of commercial uh, office space construction around the country. From 1980 to 1990, commercial office doubled in size. Now, much bigger footprint than what storage is. My point I'm trying to get at is there's a lot of money out there on the street in commercial real estate right now that if they don't figure out a way to refi those projects, it could get ugly. And which is why I say I hope for what you're saying is the truth, because the alternative, 1990, everyone remembers 2008, of course, and that was absolutely not fun in any way, shape, or form. But 1991 wasn't a whole lot better, right? The government actually created a company to sell off those assets. Little tidbit for folks: Blackstone actually got their start buying distressed assets from the federal government after the recession of 1991. I'm going to pivot now. I told you this ahead of time. I'm fascinated by the fact that you co-founded this business with your brother. That always makes me happy. I'm actually looking at a picture of me and my two brothers just sitting on the table at my parents' house right now, and love my brothers to death. Don't know if I would have the guts to go start a business with them. So talk to me about the relationship with Anthony, and how did you guys decide to team up and go build a business together?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it's kind of 50-50 depending on who you talk to. They're like, oh, I could definitely do that. I love my siblings, things like that. Or they're like, hey, I love my siblings, but also if I spent every day with them, I would probably hate them. And we argue all the time, things like that. For us, it kind of was a natural path. So we kind of both grew up in construction, obviously with our dad owning a construction company, but then we kind of went different routes. I went the route of actually kind of joining the industry, working in commercial real estate development, working for a general contractor, things like that. And my brother, he went the complete opposite route and started doing software. So he started as a software engineer when he was young, when we were still in high school. And then he went to school for computer engineering, and then eventually built a few different companies, as well as was like lead engineers at another company. And so when I kind of stumbled upon this, we had already been talking about how we wanted to start a company together. We just weren't sure what it was. over the last like maybe year or two before we started this. We are like, eventually we're going to start something together. We'll figure out like an idea that makes sense. And just when I was kept working with all these different ownership groups and seeing how they were managing everything, I was like, hey, Anthony, I really think that there's like a problem here that like we can go after and try and like solve, because everyone I'm talking to is still stuck in email chains and Excel spreadsheets, because the solutions that exist for the owner side of construction and development just really aren't very great. And so we started talking back and forth, and we just kind of were like, hey, like, want to just like go for it. Like we definitely think there's an idea here, a market here. We talked to a bunch of different individuals that like we were working for. And so it just kind of like made sense and like meshed. Like when we kind of had this idea inside of construction, he had software experience and knowledge and is a really skilled software engineer. So we were able to put together a lot of those like initial designs and an initial kind of like thought process of like, okay, well, how would this work and stuff like that, like all together, and didn't have to like go out like a lot of people when they're first starting out to raise a crazy round just to hire a bunch of software engineers, because then obviously his network was interested, and so now we have a few different software engineers working with us. So it's we kind of like stumbled upon it, and how it works today is honestly it's really great. So I don't know how like else to explain it. We're very passionate about like what we're building. So of course, just like any business partner, I mean, if you talk to anybody who's been in business with anybody, it doesn't matter if they're their sibling or not. It's basically like a marriage. And so I definitely talk to him more than I talk to my fiance most days. And so at the end of the day, like there's times where we go back and forth, but we always say that it's in like the best interest of the business, because we're both so passionate about what we're building, that at the end of the day, like when we're like kind of like having conversation about something with the platform or about the product, like it's really to make the best products for everybody. And normally it's because he's passionate about going in one direction with one of the features, I'm passionate with another direction, and then ultimately we talk it through and we end up on the best path forward for everybody involved. So
I love this. Two things that I want to say. First of all, my wife's maiden name is Settembrini. So it's not Seti, but it's Settembrini. And she's passionate all the time. So I can only imagine I'd love to be a fly on the wall when you and your brother are having conversations. The second thing I wanted to say, and I'm looking forward to you showing us a little bit of Outbid in a few minutes. We project manage, we've got 8 projects that are either out of the ground or in final permitting right now, right? And some of it's on Dropbox. Some of our clients that we work for are more comfortable with Google Drive. Some people like to email. Some people I mean, there's 17 different communication paths that we use. And to your point, some of it's on Monday. Like we have a Monday board that we use. So there's all these different places that we're going for information. And quite frankly, it's a time suck, because I got to remember, hey, where is this client's information that I need to find? And so anyway, I'm not trying to be a promoter for your product, but I am saying that you're right. There absolutely is a problem of how do we solve for X of everybody involved with a certain project knows exactly where to go to get the information that they need, which is awesome. I want to stay on this path with your brother for a little bit. I'm always fascinated by the entrepreneurial journey. Like, what is it that makes people, have the willingness? You said it. You're working for a big general contractor. Listen, those jobs tend to be pretty well paid. They're pretty secure as that goes. You've got a fiance. You're going to get married. Maybe you want to have a family, maybe you don't, but whatever. But you let go of a sure thing, as sure as any regular job can be, to go out on your own. What do you attribute that to? What gave you the guts to be willing to go do that?
Yeah, I don't think everybody is built to be an entrepreneur. But I do have like this innate kind of like fire and like drive, and I think my brother shares that as well. I kind of feel like it was ingrained in us like as kids. So like I mentioned, like my dad owned a construction company, my uncle owned his own business, my aunt owned her own business, my mom eventually owned her own business. So it kind of just like we grew up around entrepreneurs. So like I knew that eventually, like even when was working for the GC and developer that I was working for in Philly, we had multiple conversations where like he eventually knew that I was going to start my own company and do my own thing. Now, granted, if you would have asked me 5 years ago what I was going to do, I would have told you that I was going to start my own GC and development company because that's what I knew best. That's the kind of the industry that I've always been a part of and I've always been fascinated with. So, my knowledge and expertise in it obviously run deep, as well as like my connections and ties to the industry. But at the same time, like it just kind of, I feel like just and kind of like a drive to no matter what, want to both prove to myself that I can do something, but also just like feel like, hey, like I actually can make a difference. And at the end of the day, too, with working for yourself, you ultimately answer to yourself. If you have a bunch of things to do and you don't do them, well, that's on you. As opposed to, if you don't do them and it's somebody else's problem, or vice versa. If you work really hard and you're working, 12 plus hour days, 7 days a week, when you're working for somebody, you might see that in the form of bonuses and things like that. But at the end of the day, with your own thing, when you put all that effort in and then things do like come through and things are great, it is great. Now, granted, of course, there's lows too, because when you start your own company, there's obviously things where if it doesn't go great, it doesn't go great, and it's not a good feeling either. So, but high days, low days, and I think kind of like that feeling and drive towards like I'm kind of creating the something in the industry that can hopefully make a difference, beyond me just building some buildings for other people. So that's kind of like how I look at it.
I love that. I'm sitting in my dad's house. My dad quit a job in 1991. I was a junior in high school. I was a little mad at him because I was getting ready to go to college, but he started his own business in 1991. So much like you, I was, kind of grew up in it, and I haven't had somebody else sign the front of my paycheck in 25 years and wouldn't trade it for anything. But to your point, there's highs and lows there. But
Yeah.
that feeling of being responsible for this is success at the end, and getting to reap those rewards is, I wouldn't
Yeah.
trade it for the world. So kudos to you for having the guts to do that, and the courage to, it's not easy. And that you're living it every day as you're building Outbid. I do want to take a few minutes and have you at least show us what it is you guys are doing, kind of give a quick overview. We'll let folks, if they're watching, be able to know how to sign up and get a more in-depth demo after you're done.
Yeah. So first, I'll just kind of like start high level with what we actually do. I know I obviously touched on how we saw ownership groups working and kind of the frustration that was shared amongst all of the people that we were working for, with just kind of either outdated tools that did exist or large enterprise solutions that just didn't make sense for their team that were also outdated, as well as just watching them kind of frustratingly use email chains and Excel spreadsheets and things like that to run and manage all of their jobs. And so what we ended up kind of like setting out to build is kind of like what we call like the owner's rep platform. So we want to take off a lot of the manual workflows, a lot of that like pain points that you're traditionally going through, whether that's sourcing and leveling different vendor bids, like your architects, engineers, suppliers, contractors, things like that for a project. Be able to help you manage those project financials. Be able to have a centralized location for you to store all of your files, to track your project schedules, things like that. But also at a price point that makes sense for smaller organizations all the way up to larger organizations, so that it's not prohibitively expensive for them to actually utilize something, to make their life and their workflows easier. So what I can do is I can share a little bit of my screen. I can go through kind of like a high level 2 minute demo of just like what the platform looks like and how it functions, just to give people an idea. And of course, if anyone actually is interested in continuing the conversation, I'm happy to share a little bit about my information after we get off the call as well, or before we get off the call as well.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys can see my screen here, but
Yep.
from a high level overview, everything inside of the platform is, like I mentioned, designed for ownership groups. We have key metrics that you can see in the top left corner. You have a map view where you can see all your projects, that are going on. Easily click open. Then we started around bidding, hence the name Outbid. So we still have our active bidding projects in the bottom left corner. And then anything that kind of needs your attention down here that you can click to open up. If I jump into, say, a specific project, you have a project dashboard where you can view high level information about that specific job. You have your cost controls here where you can jump in and track everything going on in that project. So your budgets, base contracts, change orders, total commitments, pending, unbought scope, things like that. So you can really get a sense of understanding of, hey, where are we actually at with this project? You have schedule tracking, so you can track everything inside of there. Full file manager, full photo manager inside of here as well, where you can track everything. And then where we go the deepest is inside of bidding, and it's the name Outbid. You can create RFPs for literally any vendor on the project. all digitized. Instead of sending out a 20-page Word document to those vendors in order to get your bids back in, everything lives directly inside of the platform. You add all those bidders in, it's out to a GC, can create a bid form in here for them to fill out for you, ask any questions that are important to you, build out those events and milestones. And then from there, all the RFIs live inside of the platform. All of those bids, when they come back in, we automatically format everything for you and analyze them all. So you can see side by side comparisons of who's high, who's low. You can click into any line item, get full detailed descriptions of what's included, what's not included. You can come in here and we have full bid analysis agent inside of here that has reference back to all of your notes, descriptions, clarifications, all the files in the projects, the RFIs, anything the bidders ask, or you can come in and ask it questions like, hey, it looks like Advanced Builders is about $400,000 cheaper. Can you go back through and give me a high level overview and understand what is included with the RFIs that were asked and make sure that everything is included, as well as give me insights and questions to go back and ask them. And what our platform will do is it'll actually dive through everything inside of your project with that full contextual knowledge to give you insights to make sure we say that you're picking the best vendors for the project, not just the people that put the lowest number on the piece of paper. So that's kind of like a high level walkthrough of the platform. There's obviously a ton of additional functionality. We're a two-sided platform, like marketplace platform, but everything inside of here will create different tables for you and things like that. And so that's kind of, again, high level overview. And I'm happy to walk anyone through a little bit more detailed view of everything and how it functions and works if they have interest.
Anyone who sits in the seat we sit in at S3 Partners understands the amount of work that goes into putting an RFP together, to collecting those bids, to then bid leveling those bids, and the amount of human time that you have to take to make that happen, and the
Yeah.
coordination. And look, quite frankly, there's times when we make errors as human beings, and so sometimes somebody takes time and they put a bid together, and it doesn't get the full time commitment that it deserves. So this is my way of saying, when I saw this a few weeks ago, you showed it to me briefly, mind blowing. You guys have done an absolutely fantastic job just from a visual perspective of being able to see everything. Full disclosure, I haven't been in there to see how great the AI is yet at the bid leveling piece of it. We are absolutely on the schedule to come and can do a demo with you. Looking forward to seeing how you grow this business, Zach. Your enthusiasm says a ton. Very clear by seeing the user interface that you guys have built that your brother absolutely knows what he's doing, and the team of people working on it with him. So I'm going to give a shout out again to our friend Alexander Mitchell Reams, for the introduction. Really excited to see what he does with you guys as well. Bear with me for 30 seconds. I forgot to do a commercial break earlier in the show. I want to give 30 seconds of a shout out to our sponsor, PB Brown. I'll be right back to finish up with Zach after we're back. Stores Unlocked is brought to you by PB Brown. Over $1 billion in ground-up construction delivered, from single-story to Manhattan high-rise, institutional grade, engineered for performance, and designed to stand out. Great storage catches the consumer's eye, drives traffic, and helps lease-up happen faster. From Manhattan to Miami, California to Hawaii, PB Brown is the GC to trust for your multi-million-dollar storage development. All right, Zach, so appreciate it. As I said at the beginning, you taking time out of I know what it's like to be a startup owner and how much you have on your plate to begin with. So really appreciate you taking some time to come and have this conversation with me. If somebody's watching, you can see his email down there. If somebody's watching and they want to set up a demo, they want to get a deeper input into what Outbidd is all about, see it up close and personal for themselves, what's the best way for somebody to do that?
Yeah, so two ways. I know that you just put my email on the screen here. Feel free to email me at zach@outbid.com, as well as you can go to outbid.com and book a demo directly from our website as well. Super simple. We do have two D's in our name as well, so it's Outbid. We used to say, since we started around bidding, we said we put the due diligence in bidding, just to make sure that you're actually selecting the best contractors for the project, best vendors in general. But yeah, we're we're still very much so at the beginning stages of what we're building. We have a ton of functionality that adds to a lot of people's workflows to make it simpler, easier, more organized. But we're working on a ton of different things right now to make it even easier for everyone as well.
Thank you. continued success. As I said, I'm looking forward to keep the lines of communication open with you, not only because I think Outbidd can help what S3 Partners is doing, but also because I love watching young, hungry entrepreneurs build something and see the success that can come with that. So looking forward to watching the journey. That is it for this week's episode of Storage Unlocked, brought to you by PB Brown General Contractors. Put it on the calendar next week. Really cool episode. Maurice Pagoda. He is a 40-year vet. He's been in storage longer than Zach's been alive. He's going to come in. We're going to talk all things going on in the storage industry. Obviously, been an incredible year. The founder and president of National Storage up in Michigan. He is the best. So very much looking forward to him next week. We'll see everybody next Thursday at 1 o'clock.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely my pleasure, Zach. Appreciate it.